I came home from a sales conference to find my wife had changed the locks on her house. I found someone better, she texted me from our couch. But her smug smile disappeared when I walked away without a fight. She thought I was broken. She had no idea I was plotting. For days later, when her perfect plan started crumbling, she realized her fatal mistake. The forgery, the hidden bank accounts, her personal trainer lover. I uncovered it all. Now she's facing criminal charges and begging to save our marriage. But some betrayals can't be forgiven. This isn't just about infidelity. It's about justice, revenge, and reclaiming what's mine. My name is Jason Reed. I'm 38 years old, and I'm about to tell you how my life got flipped upside down in the span of a week. I never thought I'd be one of those guys sharing their marriage problems online, but here I am. Maybe my story will help someone see the warning signs I missed. Looking back, there were red flags waving in my face the entire time. Amanda always had a thing for status and money. When we first met at a corporate event 6 years ago, I was riding high as a top sales executive for a medical equipment company. The commissions were rolling in, and I guess that's what initially caught her eye. I'm not saying she didn't love me, but the financial security I provided was definitely part of the attraction. The betrayal blindsided me completely. I had just wrapped up a 2-week sales conference in Chicago, closing deals worth millions for my company. I was exhausted but pumped to get home to Portland. All I could think about was grabbing a cold beer from my fridge, kissing my wife, and crashing in my own bed. Funny how life has other plans sometimes. I remember pulling into our driveway that Thursday afternoon, noticing something was off right away. Amanda's car was there, but so was another vehicle I didn't recognize, a flashy BMW with custom rims. My stomach dropped, but I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Then came the moment that's burned into my memory forever. I put my key in the front door, and it didn't work. I tried again, jiggling it a bit, thinking maybe the lock was sticking. Nothing. That's when I realized the locks had been changed. I knocked, confused and increasingly angry. No answer. I knocked harder, practically pounding on the door of my own damn house. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. I found someone better. Don't bother trying to come in. The audacity of it hit me like a physical blow. She was texting me from inside our house, probably sitting on the couch I'd paid for, with her new man beside her. I called her immediately. No answer. I texted back, "Amanda, what the hell is going on? Open the door now." Her response came a minute later. "It's over, Jason. My lawyer will contact yours." I stood there, keys useless in my hand, suitcase beside me, completely stunned. Through the living room window, I caught a glimpse of movement. Amanda walking by, deliberately not looking outside. And there was definitely someone else in there with her. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life and my marriage crumbled around me. The trust we had built, the future we had planned, all of it vanished in an instant of pure, cold-blooded betrayal. I stood on my own doorstep for what felt like eternity, waves of anger and disbelief washing over me. Part of me wanted to break down that door and confront them both. But I'm not that guy. I've always believed that losing your cool means losing control. So instead, I did something that probably confused Amanda to no end. I smiled. Yeah, you read that right. As the crushing weight of her betrayal threatened to bring me to my knees, I forced my lips into what must have been the most unsettling smile of my life. Then I picked up my suitcase, turned around, and walked calmly back to my car. I could feel eyes on me through the curtains as I placed my luggage in the trunk, got into the driver's seat, and pulled away from the curb without a single glance back at the house. Inside, I was a hurricane of emotions, but outside, cool as ice. My buddy Mike had once told me during a particularly rough sales quarter, when someone's trying to break you, that's exactly when you need to look unbreakable. Those words echoed in my head as I drove away from my marriage. I checked into the Westgate Hotel downtown, not some depressing motel where jilted husbands wallow in self-pity, but a high-end place with a respected steakhouse and a good bar. If Amanda thought I'd be sleeping in my car or begging to come home, she had another thing coming. Once in my room, I finally let myself process what had happened. The marriage problems we'd been having suddenly made perfect sense. Amanda's emotional distance over the past few months, her cryptic texts, her sudden girls' nights that left her coming home at 2 a.m., classic signs of an affair that I'd been too trusting to recognize. I ordered room service, a bottle of Macallan 18, and made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first call was to my company's legal department. Sarah, our head counsel who had helped me navigate complex sales contracts for years, answered on the second ring. Jason, thought you were on your way home, she said, sounding surprised. Change of plans, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I need a recommendation for the best divorce attorney in Portland. Money's no object. There was a pause. Sarah wasn't just a colleague. She knew Amanda and had been to our holiday parties. That's serious, huh? She changed the locks. There's another man in my house. The second call was to my bank. I quickly moved half our joint account funds into a new personal account, leaving plenty for household expenses, but ensuring Amanda couldn't clean me out. Not illegal, just prudent. The third call was to a private investigator recommended by our company's security team. Trust issues were driving my decisions now, and I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. As I sipped my scotch and watched the city lights below, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Where are you? We need to talk. I laughed out loud. No angry response, no desperate pleading. Instead, I simply turned off my phone, finished my drink, and got the first good night's sleep I'd had in months. The calm I felt wasn't resignation. It was the quiet confidence of a man who had already decided how this story would end. Little did Amanda know, her betrayal had freed me from a relationship that had been suffocating me for longer than I'd been willing to admit. Sometimes, when someone shows you who they really are, the best response is simply to believe them and walk away with a smile. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Amazing how catching your wife in an act of betrayal can snap everything into focus. My phone showed 12 missed calls from Amanda and a string of increasingly desperate texts. I ignored them all. Instead, I met Carter Willis, the private investigator I'd hired, for breakfast in the hotel restaurant. Carter looked exactly like you'd expect, weathered face, calculating eyes, and a no-nonsense attitude that told me he'd seen every kind of relationship crisis imaginable. So, he said after ordering coffee, tell me everything. I laid it all out. The marriage problems that had been simmering beneath the surface, Amanda's obsession with status and money, the emotional distance that had grown between us over the past 6 months. I told him about coming home to change the locks and the mystery man in my house. This isn't just about gathering evidence for a divorce, I explained. I need to know what I'm dealing with. How long has this been going on? Who is this guy? And is she trying to take me for everything I've got? Carter nodded, jotting notes in a small black notebook. People having affairs get sloppy. They leave digital footprints everywhere. Bank statements, phone records, social media, they all tell a story. By noon, I was sitting in the office of Diane Mercer, the divorce attorney Sarah had recommended. With her steel gray bob and tailored suit, Diane exuded competence and ruthlessness in equal measure. Do you have a prenup? She asked immediately. No, I admitted. We got married before my career really took off. Diane frowned. That complicates things. Oregon is an equitable distribution state. Without evidence of financial misconduct, courts typically aim for a fair split of assets acquired during marriage. What if there's evidence she's been planning this for months, using my money to set up her exit strategy? A small, predatory smile appeared on Diane's face. That would change everything. Financial infidelity alongside emotional infidelity? Judges don't look kindly on that. As I left Diane's office, my phone rang again. Amanda. This time I answered. Where are you? She demanded, her voice a mixture of anger and panic. You can't just disappear. I almost laughed at the irony. Funny, I thought that's exactly what you wanted. Me gone so you could move your boyfriend in. It's not what you think, she started, using that condescending tone I'd grown to hate. Save it. I cut her off. I'll be communicating through my attorney from now on. Your attorney? Her voice rose an octave. Jason, don't be dramatic. We can work this out between us. Translation. She didn't want lawyers involved because she had something to hide. Like you worked out changing my locks, or moving another man into my house. I kept my voice calm, remembering Diane's advice to document everything. Goodbye, Amanda. I hung up feeling stronger than I had in months. The trust issues that had been nagging at me suddenly made perfect sense. The late-night text she'd shield from my view. The mysterious weekend work retreats. The new lingerie I never saw her wear. That afternoon, Carter called with his first report. Your wife has been seeing this guy for at least 4 months, he said without preamble. His name is Eric Townsend. Works at her gym as a personal trainer. A personal trainer. Of course. The pieces were falling into place. There's more, Carter continued. She's been moving money from your joint accounts into a private account. About $35,000 so far. And there was the smoking gun. Not just emotional betrayal, but financial betrayal too. I thanked Carter and immediately called Diane with the news. Her response was immediate. We've got her. For the first time since I'd found myself locked out of my own home, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Amanda thought she was so clever, but she had no idea what was coming her way. 3 days after being locked out of my own house, I was operating like a man with a mission. Carter the PI had been worth every penny, delivering a folder thick with evidence of Amanda's betrayal. Your wife and Eric have been seeing each other for at least 7 months, he explained as we sat in his cluttered office. I've got time-stamped photos of them together going back to last fall. 7 months. That meant Amanda had been cheating almost since I'd started taking on more travel for work. While I was flying across the country closing deals to support her lifestyle, she was starting an affair with her personal trainer. The classic cheating wife scenario was almost cliché. Carter slid several photos across the desk. Amanda and Eric entering hotels. Intimate dinners at restaurants I'd never been to. Even one of them kissing in the parking lot of our gym. Each image was like a knife, but I needed to see it all. The financial trail is even more interesting, Carter continued. She's been paying for couples spa weekends, expensive dinners, even a Rolex for him last month, all from your joint account. I remember that unexplained credit card charge. She claimed it was a gift for her brother. Just another lie in what was apparently a relationship built on deception. Most damning of all, Carter said, handing me a document. She transferred the deed to your house in her name 3 weeks ago. The signature on the transfer document, it's not yours. I stared at the paper, at the forgery of my signature. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was fraud. Within the hour, I was sitting with Diane showing her everything Carter had uncovered. This is identity theft and fraud, Diane said, examining the forged deed. We're filing criminal charges immediately. By the end of the day, I had filed a police report for forgery and identity theft. Diane had also secured an emergency court order allowing me access to my home to retrieve personal belongings and documentation. The order specifically stated that Amanda and any other occupants had to vacate the premises during my scheduled visit. I also contacted my bank's fraud department with evidence that Amanda had been making unauthorized transfers. They froze our joint accounts pending investigation, cutting off her financial pipeline. That evening, I received a panic call from Amanda. What did you do? She demanded. My cards aren't working. Maybe talk to Eric about it, I replied coolly. I hear he's been enjoying the fruits of those cards for months. This is ridiculous, she sputtered. You can't just. Actually, I can. And tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'll be coming to the house with a police escort to collect my things. Court order. You and your boyfriend need to be gone. The silence on the other end was deeply satisfying. Jason, please. Her voice had changed completely, growing soft, pleading. We need to talk about this. I made a mistake. No, Amanda. I corrected her. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was calculated betrayal. I hung up, feeling the first real sense of control since this nightmare began. At precisely 2 p.m. the next day, I pulled up to my house with a police officer beside me. Seeing my own home as a restricted zone felt surreal, but the officer's presence gave me confidence as we approached the front door. Mr. Reed, I'm Officer Hernandez. I'll be here to ensure compliance with the court order, he explained professionally. I nodded gratefully as we rang the doorbell. No response. After a second ring, the officer knocked firmly. Police. We have a court order. Finally, the door opened. Amanda stood there, eyes puffy from crying, wearing the silk robe I bought her for our anniversary. No sign of Eric. You have 90 minutes to gather essential personal items, Officer Hernandez informed me, showing Amanda the court order. Mrs. Reed must remain present, but cannot interfere. Amanda crossed her arms defensively. This is ridiculous. You can't just barge in with police. Officer Hernandez remained impassive. Ma'am, this is a lawful court order. Interference could result in your arrest. That silenced her quickly. I moved through the house methodically, following Diane's detailed checklist. Personal documents, irreplaceable items, evidence of my ownership. The place already felt different. Eric's protein shaker in the kitchen, unfamiliar shoes by the door, subtle signs of my replacement. In my office, I found my safe unlocked and partially emptied. My grandfather's Rolex was missing, along with several other valuables. "Did you take items from my safe?" I asked Amanda, with Officer Hernandez as witness. "They're my things too," she mumbled. I took photos of the safe and made notes for my attorney. In a master bedroom, more signs of Eric, men's deodorant on the dresser, a phone charger that wasn't mine. I photographed everything. Opening my closet, I found half my clothes gone. "Where are my things?" Amanda shrugged. "I donated some stuff to Goodwill. You never wore it anyway." Officer Hernandez made a note on his clipboard. Another violation to add to the list. As I packed my remaining clothes and essentials, Amanda followed me from room to room, her initial defensiveness melting into anxiety. "Jason, can we please talk about this? I know you're angry, but throwing away 5 years of marriage is extreme." I continued packing silently. "It was a mistake," she continued. "Eric doesn't mean anything to me. I was lonely with you traveling so much." The classic blame shifting of a caught cheater. I kept working, refusing to engage. By the time I finished, my SUV was packed with everything truly important to me. As Officer Hernandez and I prepared to leave, Amanda made one last desperate attempt. "Where are you staying? Can I call you later?" "Please, Jason." I finally looked her directly in the eyes. "My attorney will contact you about the criminal charges and divorce proceedings. Don't call me again." As we drove away, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The home I'd worked so hard for was now a crime scene in my mind, contaminated by betrayal. But for the first time since this ordeal began, I was moving forward rather than simply reacting. 1 week after being locked out of my house, I sat across from Diane in her office as she laid out her legal strategy. The evidence Carter had gathered formed an impressive stack on her desk. "We're filing 2 separate actions," she explained. "First, criminal charges for forgery and identity theft regarding the deed transfer. Second, divorce proceedings citing infidelity, financial misconduct, and abandonment." I nodded, surprisingly calm. After the initial shock, I'd moved past emotional reactions into strategic thinking. "What are our chances?" "With this evidence," Diane raised an eyebrow. "Extremely good. The forged deed alone is a slam dunk. That's fraud, plain and simple." She pushed a document toward me. "Amanda's attorney contacted me this morning. They're proposing a settlement offer." I scanned the document, almost laughing at the audacity. Amanda was offering to return the house to me in exchange for dropping all criminal charges and paying her a hefty settlement. She steals my house through forgery, then offers to give it back if I pay her. I shook my head in disbelief. "Not happening." "Good," Diane said, seeming pleased with my response. "Because we could do much better. I recommend countering with our own terms." Our counter was straightforward. Amanda would face the criminal charges for forgery. She would return all jewelry, watches, and other gifts I'd given her during our marriage. She would be responsible for her own legal fees. And most importantly, she would receive nothing in the divorce settlement due to her documented fraud. "She won't accept these terms," Diane warned. "But it establishes our position clearly. We're not negotiating with a criminal." "What about the personal trainer, Eric?" I asked. "We're naming him as correspondent in the divorce," Diane confirmed. "Plus, there could be criminal conspiracy charges if we can prove he knew about or helped with the forgery." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Please call me. We need to talk before this gets worse." I showed Diane the message. She shook her head. "Classic attempt to manipulate you outside legal channels. Don't respond." As I left Diane's office, I felt something unexpected. Genuine pity for Amanda. She'd thrown away a good marriage for an affair, then compounded it with criminal acts, and now reality was closing in. I'd learned something valuable from this crisis. When faced with betrayal, respond not with blind emotion, but with methodical action. The evidence we'd gathered, the legal expertise I'd enlisted, and my refusal to be manipulated had completely reversed our positions. From victim to plaintiff, from locked out to legal aggressor, the transformation had happened in just 1 week. and Amanda was finally beginning to understand the consequences of her betrayal. 10 days after being locked out of my house, I walked into the county courthouse for our first hearing. Diane had prepared me well, but nothing could completely erase the surreal feeling of seeing my wife across the aisle as a legal opponent. Amanda looked smaller somehow, her usual confidence replaced by nervous fidgeting. Her attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit, whispered urgently in her ear. Eric was notably absent. Judge Catherine Wilson, a silver-haired woman with penetrating eyes, called the courtroom to order. "We're here regarding two matters: an emergency injunction on property transfer and a restraining order. Let's begin." For the next hour, Diane masterfully presented our case. The forged deed transfer, the fraudulent diversion of funds, the changing of locks without notice. Amanda's attorney tried to paint it as a misunderstanding between spouses, but the evidence was overwhelming. When the judge asked Amanda directly about the signature on the deed transfer, she crumbled. I thought he would sign it anyway," she stammered. "We were having problems, and I was afraid he'd try to sell the house." Judge Wilson's expression hardened. "So you admit the signature isn't his?" Amanda looked at her attorney desperately, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Yes," she finally admitted, "but I only did it to protect myself." The judge wasn't impressed. "Mrs. Reed, forgery isn't protection. It's a criminal offense." By the end of the hearing, Judge Wilson granted everything we'd requested. The deed transfer was invalidated. Amanda was ordered to vacate our house within 48 hours, and a restraining order prevented her from accessing our financial accounts. Furthermore, the judge added, "I'm referring the forgery matter to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." As we left the courtroom, Amanda tried to approach me. "Jason, please," she called out. "This has gone too far. Don't do this to us." Diane stepped between us. "My client has nothing to say to you. Direct all communication through proper legal channels." Walking down the courthouse steps, I felt a weight lifting. "That went even better than expected," I said to Diane. "This is just the beginning," she replied with a tight smile. But yes, today was a very good day. That evening, I received a series of increasingly desperate texts from Amanda. The final one simply read, "I made a terrible mistake. Please don't throw away everything we built." I didn't respond, but I saved the message as further evidence. The tables had completely turned. The woman who had locked me out of my home was now herself being forced to leave. Karma, it seemed, worked faster than I'd expected. 2 weeks after being locked out, I stood in front of my house with a new set of keys. The court had granted me exclusive use of the property while the divorce proceedings continued. It felt strange returning to the place that had been the scene of such betrayal. As I turned the key and pushed open the door, I was struck by the emptiness. Amanda had clearly removed many of her belongings during her court-mandated exit. Good. Less to deal with later. Walking through each room felt like touring a museum of my failed marriage. The living room where we'd hosted dinner parties. The kitchen where we'd cooked together on lazy Sundays. The bedroom. I couldn't bring myself to enter that room yet. My phone rang. It was Carter. "Just checking in," he said. "How's the homecoming?" "Weird," I admitted. "Like I'm walking through a movie set of my former life." "That's normal," he assured me. "Listen, I've got an update on your wife. Since the hearing, she's been staying at Eric's apartment." I wasn't surprised, but the confirmation still stung slightly. And they've been fighting. Neighbors have called in noise complaints twice. Seems the relationship isn't holding up well under pressure. I found myself feeling nothing but mild curiosity. "What about the financial investigation?" "That's actually why I called," Carter said, his tone shifting. "We found evidence that Eric knew about the forgery. Text messages where they discussed the plan. Amanda sent him photos of your signature to practice copying." This was huge. Evidence of conspiracy that could strengthen both the criminal case and our divorce position. Later that evening, Diane called to confirm she'd received Carter's findings. "This changes things," she said. "With evidence of conspiracy, Eric could be facing charges too. I suspect once he understands that, he might distance himself from Amanda quickly." She was right. The next morning, Amanda called me sobbing. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Eric kicked me out," she cried. "He says I'm too much trouble now. Where am I supposed to go?" The desperation in her voice would have moved me just weeks ago. Now, I felt only a cool detachment. That's not my problem anymore, Amanda. But I have nowhere to go. My parents live in Florida, and all our friends are taking your side. You should have thought about consequences before committing forgery and infidelity. I replied calmly. Talk to your attorney about your options. After hanging up, I realized something important. The pain of betrayal was fading. In its place was a growing sense of freedom and possibility. 3 weeks after the initial betrayal, I sat in Diane's office reviewing the final divorce settlement proposal. Things had accelerated dramatically when the district attorney formally charged Amanda with forgery and identity theft. Facing criminal charges, she was suddenly eager to resolve the divorce quickly. She's accepting all our terms, Diane said, sliding the document across her desk. No claims on the house, no alimony, equitable division of genuine joint property, and she'll cover her own legal fees. I scanned the paperwork carefully. What prompted this reversal? Last week she was still fighting for half of everything. Reality, Diane said simply. Her attorney finally convinced her that contesting the divorce while facing criminal charges would only make her situation worse. Plus, there's this. She handed me a printout of a news article. Eric Townsend had been fired from the gym where he worked after management discovered he was involved in a forgery investigation. The article mentioned Amanda by name as his co-defendant. Her world is collapsing, Diane observed. Eric abandoned her. Her reputation is in tatters, and she's facing potential jail time. The divorce is the least of her problems now. I felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction that justice was being served, but also a strange, distant sadness for the woman I once loved. What about the criminal case? I asked. The DA is offering a plea deal, probation instead of jail time if she admits guilt and pays restitution. Given her lack of prior criminal history, she'll likely take it. I nodded, feeling it was a fair outcome. Let's finalize the divorce then. That afternoon, I received a letter from Amanda. Not an email or text, but an actual handwritten letter. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. Jason, it began, by the time you read this, our divorce will be nearly finalized. I know apologies are meaningless at this point, but I need you to know how deeply I regret what I did. Not just because of the consequences I'm facing, but because I threw away something genuine for something hollow. Eric left the moment things got difficult. Exactly what I once accused you of doing, but never did. You deserve better than my betrayal. I see that clearly now, for days too late. I hope someday you find happiness with someone worthy of your loyalty. It was signed simply, Amanda. I folded the letter and put it away, feeling neither vindication nor anger, but something quieter, the final closing of a chapter in my life. Amanda had made her choices, and now we were both living with the consequences. The difference was, my future still held promise. I was rebuilding, while she was just beginning to understand what she had destroyed. 6 months after being locked out of my house, I stood in the front yard watching a real estate sign being hammered into place. Despite winning the legal right to keep the house in the divorce, I decided to sell it. Some places carry too many memories to ever truly feel like home again. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, with Amanda accepting all our terms. She'd also taken the DA's plea deal on the forgery charges, 2 years probation, community service, and restitution payments. Last I heard, she'd moved back to Florida to live with her parents and was working remotely for a marketing firm. Eric had disappeared completely from the picture, unwilling to face the consequences of their relationship crisis. My career had rebounded stronger than ever. The company had created a new position for me, Director of National Sales, that required less travel but offered more responsibility and compensation. I'd accepted it gratefully, recognizing that my marriage problems had partly stemmed from my constant absences. You sure about selling? Mike asked as we watched the real estate agent drive away. He'd been my rock throughout this ordeal, offering his guest room when needed and never once saying, "I told you so," despite having warned me about Amanda's materialistic tendencies years ago. Absolutely, I replied. Fresh start. No ghosts. The trust issues I developed through Amanda's betrayal were still there, but I was working through them. Diane had introduced me to her sister, Rebecca, a pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and a wicked sense of humor. We'd been dating for 2 months, taking it slowly, building a foundation of honesty. That evening, as Rebecca and I enjoyed dinner at my favorite steakhouse, she asked about the house sale. Are you sad to let it go? I considered this carefully. No, I thought I would be, but it feels liberating. That house represents the old chapter. I'm ready for the next one. And what does the next chapter look like? She asked, her eyes curious but not pushy. I smiled, realizing I finally had an answer that felt right. It looks like building something authentic, a relationship based on mutual respect and honesty. No games, no keeping score. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'd like to be part of that chapter, if you'll have me. As I looked at her, this brilliant, genuine woman who had entered my life unexpectedly, I felt the last shadows of betrayal finally lifting. Sometimes, being locked out of one door leads you to open another that you never knew existed. And sometimes, that new door leads exactly where you were meant to go all along.